You can prepare all the documents, prove solid financial stability, receive a prestigious scholarship, or simply want to visit family in the U.S., and still be denied a visa, with no explanation, no second chance. In 2025, millions of people across Asia are facing a cold reality. The door to America isn't closing because they did something wrong, but because they come from an unlucky country, Bangladesh, when an opportunity is branded as a threat. There is a strange paradox existing in an increasingly flat world. Globalization is praised, educational cooperation encouraged, economic exchange expanded. Yet, the very gateways symbolizing those ideals, like visas to the United States, are quietly closing for millions of people simply because they hold an unlucky nationality. Bangladesh is a prime example, not because its people did something wrong, but because of a deeply rooted bias in the U.S. visa system, presumed immigrant intent. With over 170 million people, Bangladesh is one of the fastest-growing middle-class societies in Asia. Cities like Dhaka are not only densely populated, but also vibrant, full of tech startups, financial hubs, and students striving for international scholarships. But in stark contrast to this internal development, the path to the U.S., whether for study, business, or tourism, is becoming increasingly fragile, like a crack spreading through a system built on suspicion. Every year, tens of thousands of Bangladeshis prepare their U.S. visa applications with the mindset of doing everything right. Students holding acceptance letters from prestigious universities, engineers invited to technology conferences, or parents with children in California simply wishing to visit their grandchildren. They enter interviews with certified documents, stable finances, clear property ownership, and transparent travel history. Yet after only a few minutes in a consular room, that dream is dismissed with a brief sentence: "Not qualified." No explanation, no appeal. No one really knows the specific reason, but most understand. The invisible weight of immigrant intent, the assumption that every applicant plans to stay, hangs over them. Though this presumption has long been embedded in U.S. law, its application lacks consistent standards. A young single applicant may be viewed with suspicion simply for not being married. Someone with children in the U.S. is assumed likely to stay to help raise grandchildren. Even an engineer with a strong travel history in Europe may not escape the doubtful gaze because it's not enough reason to return home. What's important to note is, this isn't an official policy or a political ban. It is the byproduct of an opaque operational mechanism, where visa approval depends too much on the personal impressions of the interviewer rather than a fair data-driven process. And that's what turns carefully prepared applications, meant to represent trust and collaboration, into lottery tickets of chance. In a broader sense, this isn't just Bangladesh's story. It reflects how the U.S. is operating its visa system amidst global competition, immigration concerns, and unconscious biases. When a country with a young population, strong academic capacity, and growing strategic ties like Bangladesh is still being systematically excluded from the American dream, the question arises: what is America really protecting? Security or stereotype? The consequence of rejection is more than just a broken dream. It's the erosion of faith in a system once seen as a global standard. For every student denied, a classroom in New York loses an Asian perspective. For every entrepreneur blocked from attending a trade fair, a chance for cooperation is shut down. And for every family that can't reunite, a human story is brushed aside by the cold signature on a rejection slip. In 2025, as the world becomes increasingly divided by bias, data, and algorithm, a visa is no longer just an entry permit. It is a mirror reflecting how a nation views the world. And if America hopes to maintain its global leadership, perhaps it's time to reconsider how it's treating citizens from Dhaka, not as intruders, but as people knocking with belief. Cambodia, when silent politics make ordinary people pay the price. There is no alarm, no official sanction announcement, just a series of U.S. visas quietly denied, steadily, silently, as if someone within the system had pulled down an iron curtain without saying a word. For the Cambodian people, the dream of coming to America in 2025 did not shatter in a public crisis. It faded quietly between unexplained interviews and cold, curt emails. Visa denied. Not everyone knows that the relationship between the United States and Cambodia has been strained for years, partially due to deportation policies. When Cambodia refused to accept Khmer origin citizens deported from the U.S. for criminal offenses, Washington responded with visa sanctions, officially targeted at high-ranking officials. But in reality, the impact reached far wider. Thousands of innocent citizens, unrelated to politics or crime, were swept into this cold storm. On student forums, in Cambodian community groups in Phnom Penh or Siem Reap, such stories appear more frequently. My child was accepted into a university in Ohio, but got denied a visa. I had an invitation to my sister's wedding in Houston with complete sponsorship documents, but still got rejected with no clear reason. These stories repeat so often that they've become a bitter truth. Cambodians, even with full documentation, clear finances, and formal invitations, are shut out of America's gates not for what they've done, but for what their government once refused. What makes the situation more bitter is the randomness of the system. Two students from the same school, studying the same major, with the same scholarship and travel history. One gets approved, the other denied. Two mothers, both visiting their children living legally in the U.S. One allowed to fly, the other stopped. No one truly knows what the real criteria are, and no one has the right to know. Explanations don't exist. Appeals are unthinkable. For many Cambodians, this is not just a failed visa application. It is a silent denial of their identity. The feeling of being equated with political risk, judged not by individual merit, but by the passport they carry, has become a shared pain within the community. A punishment with no name, no declaration, but one that spreads like an oil spill. However, beyond the rejections lies a deeper concern: the erosion of faith. People are beginning to lose trust in international systems. They no longer see the U.S. visa as a measure of transparency or fairness, but as a politicized game where humans are merely background figures. Instead of trying harder, they gradually withdraw, seeking destinations like Australia, Canada, or Europe, where at least refusals come with reasons and a chance to respond. On a macro level, this raises a serious question. If the United States, a country once proud of being the land of opportunity and a fortress of democracy, is treating citizens of a small nation like Cambodia with such cold silence and unverifiable mechanisms, what does that say about America's diplomatic direction in the 21st century? The answer doesn't lie with a State Department spokesperson, but in the tired eyes of the mothers denied visas for the third time, of young students putting scholarship papers back in a drawer, of business people giving up dreams of shaking hands with American partners because they didn't meet the conditions. These people are not threats. They are seekers of opportunity, of connection, people who want to believe that the world still holds an open door for them. But, at this moment, that door, at least for Cambodians, hasn't slammed shut. It's just inching closed, little by little, silently, in shades of gray, and full of helplessness. Vietnam. When trust is bound by old memories. If you look at recent diplomatic photos between the United States and Vietnam, you'll see smiles, handshakes, optimistic declarations of a comprehensive strategic partnership. Two nations that were once enemies have now become allies in multiple fields: economy, education, defense. But beneath that glossy surface lies a choking reality. Thousands of Vietnamese citizens, despite having full qualifications and good intentions, are still coldly denied U.S. visas because of a past they did not create and a system that won't let them step beyond it. For many years, Vietnam has been listed among the countries with high visa overstay rates, meaning people who were granted U.S. visas but didn't leave on time. That statistic, although not representative of all Vietnamese, has become a heavy shadow hanging over every visa application. An invisible ghost, where simply holding Vietnamese nationality marks you within the system as high risk, even if you're a university lecturer invited to present at a science conference in Boston, or a student newly accepted to Stanford on a full scholarship. Ironically, the more Vietnamese citizens travel legally to the U.S. for study, business, or family visits, the more outdated the overstay history becomes. Yet the visa review system does not forget, or does not want to forget. Stereotypical assessments still apply, sometimes simply because the applicant is young, unmarried, or lacks travel history to developed countries. We cannot grant a visa at this time, but that does not mean you are unqualified. The pre-printed response on rejection slips handed out daily at U.S. consulates in Ho Chi Minh City or Hanoi. But for the recipient, it is a denial, a wave of disappointment crashing into their trust. No one explains why valid documents, clear finances, and strong academic records are judged as insufficient reasons to return to Vietnam. No one says it directly, but everyone understands. They are suspected simply because they carry a red passport. Behind every rejection is a disrupted story. A student from Hue forced to cancel her master's program in environmental studies at the University of Oregon, even with a full scholarship. A software engineer in Da Nang denied the chance to visit a partner company in Silicon Valley, despite previous travel to Europe, Australia, Japan, all with timely returns. A mother from Haiphong blocked from meeting her daughter after giving birth in the U.S., simply because a consular officer judged there were not enough ties to return. The problem is not just the denial, it's the way it happens: inconsistent, opaque, and offering no path for correction. Vietnamese citizens don't just feel rejected from the American dream, they feel rejected from the right to be heard. To be judged as someone likely to overstay without the chance to respond, that's not immigration policy. That's the refusal of dialogue. Meanwhile, the U.S. government continues to push for cooperation programs with Vietnam, from defense and education to semiconductor supply chains. But can such cooperation ever be complete if Vietnamese citizens, the very people who represent people-to-people connections, are hindered by a biased and unresponsive system? In 2025, America remains a dream destination for many Vietnamese, not only for its economy or academics, but because of hope in a transparent, fair system where people are judged by ability, not assumptions. But each unexplained rejection letter chips away at that hope, bit by bit. And if America truly wants to build a long-term relationship with Vietnam, it must begin by listening and fixing a system that remains silent in the face of the most legitimate voices. Iran, when nationality becomes a silent sentence. If there's one country that truly understands what it means to be judged not by action but by identity, it's Iran. In the global visa landscape of 2025, Iranians don't just face difficulty accessing America's doors, they are nearly excluded from the game entirely. There is no U.S. embassy on Iranian soil, no visa center, no clear support process. Every hope, every plan, every connection to the country across the ocean must begin with something irrational: leaving your own country, paying a large sum of money and praying in silence. For an Iranian citizen wanting to apply for a U.S. visa, the journey begins by finding a way to a third country, like Turkey, the UAE, or Armenia, just to step foot into a U.S. consulate. But that's only the beginning. Many spend months preparing documents, requesting time off work, arranging finances, and facing suspicious stares the moment they arrive at foreign airports. They're not trying to get to America, as in escaping or seeking asylum. They just want to study, work, visit family, or simply present scientific research at a conference. And what they receive, far too often, is a cold denial. Not because of any mistake, but because of the name on their passport. The U.S. visa rejection rate for Iranian citizens consistently ranks among the highest in the world, over 80%. But that number doesn't fully capture the sense of isolation Iranians feel. Here, rejection isn't just a part of screening. It carries the tone of punishment, as if visa applicants are bearing the consequences of a diplomatic war they never had the chance to take sides in. In the name of national security, the U.S. denies thousands of Iranian students every year, including those accepted to top universities like MIT, Yale, or Stanford. They are young scientists with internationally recognized research, software engineers, doctors, scholars, all grouped under a vague risk simply because of where they were born. Even elderly individuals wanting to attend a grandchild's wedding or visit a dying relative aren't spared from that shadow of denial. Some go so far as to pass the interview round, only to be denied the visa at the last minute due to elements that emerged during security screening. No one knows exactly what those elements are. No one is allowed to ask, and no one has the right to appeal. For Iranians, the U.S. visa system is no longer a door to knock on. It is a nameless, reasonless, impenetrable wall. What's even more painful is that Iranian Americans, legal citizens living in California, Texas, or New York, are also affected. They can't invite their parents to graduations, can't reunite with family. These family ties, the foundation of human connection, have been politicized to a chilling degree. In a world where migration and connection are the backbone of progress, Iranians are left suspended between two realities, wanted by the world for their intellect, yet watched with fixed suspicion by the American visa system. The question arises, if the goal of visa policy is to ensure security, is it fair to equate millions of people with the negative actions of a small group? And if the United States truly wants to build lasting influence in culture, science, and diplomacy, can it continue to turn its back on a generation of Iranians eager to contribute to the world rather than be excluded from it? In 2025, the world has moved far beyond the Cold War era. But for Iranians, the feeling of isolation, not because of who they are, but because of how they've been shaped through a political lens, remains. And in that picture, the U.S. may have succeeded in building security walls, but it is slowly losing the very people who should have been bridges. Pakistan. When a shared history still isn't enough to open the door. Few countries have as deep a connection with the United States as Pakistan. From the early days of the Cold War to the post-9/11 fight against terrorism, the two nations have stood side by side, albeit often with tension, in various military, humanitarian, and economic partnerships. Millions of Pakistani Americans live, study, work, and contribute to the United States. They are doctors, engineers, entrepreneurs, professors, cultural and economic bridges between two worlds. Yet, in 2025, ironically, it is the people of this very nation who remain among the most frequently denied U.S. visas. And few truly understand why. According to data from the U.S. Department of State, visa denial rates for Pakistani applicants often range between 40% and 60%, depending on the year. But that cold statistic does not reflect the emotional weight Pakistanis carry when facing visa rejection. Not just once, but repeatedly, even after carefully preparing their documents, meeting all requirements, and having no blemish on their legal or financial history. There are stories so painful they've become symbols of helplessness. A doctor who served on the COVID-19 front lines in Karachi, invited to speak at a health conference in Chicago, denied a visa due to concerns over potential overstay. A brilliant student who received a full scholarship to Columbia University, rejected without a specific reason. An elderly father simply wishing to witness his son's graduation in the U.S., with full sponsorship documents, still refused with the familiar reasoning, insufficient ties to home country. What frustrates Pakistani applicants most is not just the high rejection rate, but the lack of transparency in the review process. There are no clear criteria, no detailed guidance, no mechanism for feedback or appeal. You can be denied despite having traveled to Europe, maintaining a substantial bank account, owning property in Lahore or Islamabad, and holding a formal invitation from a reputable U.S. institution. But if a consular officer senses risk, it renders everything meaningless. In the minds of many Pakistanis, applying for a U.S. visa is no longer a process, but a gamble. A harsh lottery where honesty, effort, and qualifications do not guarantee any positive outcome. This hurts, not just individuals, but entire communities. Academic dreams are buried. Business opportunities are lost. Family reunions are delayed indefinitely. What's more painful is when Pakistani Americans, citizens who pay taxes, run companies, teach at top universities, still cannot bring their loved ones to the U.S., not even once. They feel severed by a system that pays no attention to context or personal stories, only the stamp on a passport. This doesn't just erode family bonds. It plants seeds of doubt in those who once believed America stood for opportunity and justice. From a geopolitical standpoint, maintaining a harsh visa policy toward Pakistan serves no clear strategic purpose. It does not enhance security, does not improve bilateral relations, and certainly doesn't portray the U.S. as a reliable partner in the region. On the contrary, it sends a contradictory message that despite shared history, despite a strong diaspora, Pakistanis are still not viewed with basic fairness. In 2025, as the U.S. continues to face global challenges in talent competition, international trust, and value-driven leadership, its visa policy toward Pakistan reflects a sad paradox. A nation once considered a close ally is now treated as a potential threat, not because of anything its people have done wrong, but because the system gives them no chance to prove otherwise. In a world that needs more connection than ever, is America closing too many doors, including ones that were once bridges, all because of unnamed suspicion? If so, what it may lose isn't just a few visa applications, but trust, goodwill, and relationships built across generations. Afghanistan. When promises become memories that never get answered. Perhaps no country bears more scars from U.S. intervention than Afghanistan. 2 decades of military involvement, billions of dollars in aid, hundreds of thousands of Afghans cooperating with U.S. agencies, organizations, the military, and NGOs, and then, in one swift withdrawal in 2021, it all vanished into thin air. But what followed was the real long-term shock. A visa system that barely exists and promises of protection, once spoken under the glow of conference lights, now never mentioned again. After the Taliban returned to power, the U.S. Embassy in Kabul shut down. That meant Afghan citizens no longer had any official channel to apply for a visa within their own country. To access opportunities for education, family reunification, or even to escape threats of violence, they had to do something that seemed irrational: cross into a third country, like Pakistan, Qatar, or the UAE. just to attend an interview that might never happen. And if you think this only affects a small elite, look at the numbers that were never widely published. Thousands of people who worked as interpreters for the U.S. military, medical aides, infrastructure experts, teachers in U.S.-funded education programs, all have submitted applications for immigration or asylum visas years ago. But by 2025, many of them still have not received a response. Some were rejected for unclear reasons. Others were simply forgotten in an overwhelmed system lacking resources. More painful still is the helplessness of those who overcame every obstacle to reach the gate, and were still turned away. A female student from Herat received a full scholarship from a university in California, but couldn't apply for a visa because there was no place to submit her application in-country. A former doctor who worked for an international health organization and is now being hunted by the Taliban for assisting Americans, he's forced to live in hiding, using a fake passport, while his humanitarian visa request remains under review. On the other side, the U.S. government has repeatedly declared its continued commitment to support Afghan allies. But that support has become a formality, written on press releases, not enacted on the ground. The special visa system for those who served U.S. missions, SIV, Special Immigrant Visa, operates at a pace that is shamefully slow. They are asked to provide verification documents from organizations that have already left, to explain a past they once had to conceal just to survive. For ordinary citizens, women, students, journalists, artists, applying for a U.S. visa is no longer a distant dream, but an impossible journey. Many cannot get a passport due to tight control by the Taliban government. Others cannot cross borders because they lack valid ID documents. And even if they manage to reach Islamabad or Doha, they face interview schedules that stretch on for months, while their lives remain under daily threat from violence the world has grown used to. From a moral standpoint, the question arises, can the United States continue to promote values of democracy, human rights, and freedom globally, while turning its back on the very people who believed in those values and risked everything to support them? From a strategic perspective, what happens to the credibility of a superpower when its promises become something no one believes in anymore, and visas, once symbols of hope, turn into evidence of abandonment? In 2025, Afghanistan's story no longer appears on front pages, but across the border, in cramped hostels in Lahore, in overcrowded refugee offices in Istanbul, and in thousands of inboxes awaiting replies from the U.S. State Department, there are still people waiting, not waiting for a miracle, but waiting for what was once promised. And in that waiting, there is not only disappointment, there is deep hurt born of a sad truth. Sometimes the hardest thing to obtain isn't a visa, it's justice. North Korea, when there's no door to be denied. If in Bangladesh, Cambodia, or Afghanistan, applying for a U.S. visa is an unequal battle, then in the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, the very concept of applying for a visa has never even had a chance to form. Here, the pain doesn't lie in being denied, but in never having the right to ask. No application, no interview schedule, no process, no hope. On the global visa map of 2025, North Korea is a blank spot, not because no one wants to leave, but because the world has assumed they simply cannot. There is no U.S. embassy in Pyongyang, no visa processing center, no official consular relationship between the two countries. And in a country where leaving the border is considered treason, where citizens must request permission just to move between provinces, the dream of a trip to the United States, even just to visit family or attend an academic conference, sounds like fiction. To North Koreans, the outside world is another planet, and the United States, a symbol distorted through the lens of propaganda, is both terrifying and unreachable. And yet, The reality is even more ironic. Among the rare few North Koreans who have left the country, mostly diplomats, athletes, or those from privileged classes, a small number have defected, sought asylum, and started new lives in South Korea, Europe, or Canada. These individuals, after reintegrating into society, learning new languages, and finding stable jobs, sometimes try to apply for U.S. visas to visit relatives or participate in humanitarian efforts. But even they, those who have left the regime, have clear identities, hold new citizenship, are still frequently denied simply because of one thing: their place of birth. Pyongyang, Democratic People's Republic of Korea. That single line of birth is enough to trigger additional security checks, uncontrollable review processes, and, in many cases, a denial without specific explanation. To Americans, this might be seen as risk prevention. But to those who risk their lives to cross borders, lived in Thai refugee camps for years, and started over from nothing, it's a stab at the trust they once placed in the free world. For the Korean-American community, the inability to invite surviving relatives from North Korea to the U.S. is a pain that has lasted for decades. Letters that are never sent, reunions that never happen, voices calling mother or father with no reply, all are the legacy of a war that never officially ended, and a foreign policy that never found a humanitarian path. In 2025, while South Korea and the U.S. continue to maintain tight military, economic, and cultural alliances, the humanitarian fractures caused by the North Korea-U.S. divide continue to bleed quietly. No one denies that North Korea is a special case, a closed-off nation, strictly censored, accused of serious human rights violations, clearly not to be treated like any other normal country. But it's precisely because of this uniqueness that cutting off all access becomes counterproductive. When you allow no one from that country to engage with the outside world, not even researchers, journalists, students, or refugees, you are unintentionally maintaining the very circle of isolation you once claimed to want to break. And in a bitter paradox, while the United States continues to declare its support for the North Korean people, opposition to dictatorship, and readiness for peaceful negotiation, its own visa system leaves no pathway, not even symbolically, for North Korean citizens to see another world. No bridges, no trial opportunities, no humanitarian corridor, no capacity to change anything, even when you've already changed yourself. In 2025, in a world where data is weaponized, borders are digitized, and documents can be scanned in seconds, it is deeply ironic that there exists a nation where people are born without the right to be evaluated, because they're not even allowed to enter the review process, not denied, but with no chance to be denied, not excluded, but never even brought into the frame. And perhaps that is the cruelest form of isolation, absence so complete it becomes invisible.